Hello, I'm Miranda, and today I'm going to be reviewing White Dwarf issue 490. So I have been looking forward to this magazine since I first heard about the whole concept of the bunker idea. I've been really looking forward to reviewing this issue, and I figured since I was subscribed, I would get the issue early and have this review out super quick. And I waited, and I waited, and I waited, and I started to get a little suspicious. So I went over to my friendly local game store and found that that issue was sitting on the shelf. So I ended up rebuying my White Dwarf from the local game store, so thank you Tavern of Souls for having it, and just assumed that my White Dwarf subscription had been lost or stolen or who knows, right? And then like within I think a week, it ended up arriving in the mail, and I'm still not even done with it, so I apologize for this being out late. This is a pretty thick issue to get through, so let's just jump right into it. Of course, the White Dwarf is currently managing editor Lyle Lowry. Hi, Lyle. Talking about the cool new bunker concept that they have incorporated into the Warhammer community. So a little bit more on that, but first they do have their cool contact page. You know, people can write in, you can write into White Dwarf and share your experience with the hobby or ask questions of the staff. A lot of times folks will ask questions about how a specific model might have been painted and get that feedback. There was a cool write-in of a person who was a really big fan of Space Wolves and ended up collecting a Sister of Battle army and painting them in a Space Wolves theme, and they called the collection the Sisterhood of the Wolf, which I thought was really cool. And they're a newer painter, and kind of were getting their style figured out, and models look pretty good. And then of course there's always these fantastic submissions. There are some amazing painters that write into White Dwarf. There's another article in here called The Worlds of Warhammer. It talks about the genesis of how a lot of the characters in both 40k, Age of Sigmar, all of the Warhammer world are created. And there's actually a breakdown of the many iterations of Gazgul, Muk Uruk Thraka, say that 5 times fast, from this cute little stubby, clearly kit bash model to this enormous mech dude you've got today. It's kind of fun because it talks about how people who write stories about any of these characters, how those characters end up getting developed. And a lot of times it's just this very happenstance, serendipitous process. In fact, the article goes on to even talk about a lot of the lore got expanded on fairly organically. Apparently, the entire Horus Heresy seed started from a chapter-approved book from like 1988. Just some throwaway line about the Great Heresy or whatever, and from there spawned what is probably the most popular book series in the Black Library. Okay, so the big thing about this issue is they're introducing a Warhammer community expansion known as the Bunker. So the idea is just to enhance the community, right? To enhance people connecting through Warhammer. So you can do that through your local game store, you can do that online. If you subscribe to White Dwarf magazine, there are specific challenges and information in here to help participate in this sort of worldwide community bunker. That's part of what these little sheets actually that were included in the magazine are all about. So first off, well, first just general handy stuff. They actually give you a cool like cardboard quick start guide to just playing Warhammer 10th edition. So thank you for that. They also gave us some cool Age of Sigmar battle plans. If that is your jam, we've got some fun new missions for that. Then the bunker stuff. So there are actually monthly missions, special challenges that are going to be issued in upcoming White Dwarfs. One of them is a 40k battle, and one of them is an Age of Sigmar battle. So just depending on which game you gravitate toward is the game that you would would play if you wanted to participate and keep up with those challenges. And there is a cool scorecard that comes with the magazine to help keep track of kind of your participation in the community, and you can, you know, keep up with that again in your local game store, or set it up online, or have groups online, and just, you know, keep connected to people. And the cool thing here is it can be from playing games, it can be from assembling and painting miniatures. When you do play games, it can just be based on like specific things you've done in the games, like if you took out a warlord or if you got objectives. Playing versus winning, you know, there's different like points that you score for just participating in the community. You don't have to be highly competitive, you don't have to be super active. It's really just as active as you want to be, but it sort of encourages players to come participate. If you've got a weekly get-together that does happen at your game store, then maybe there's a little bit more of a reason to come out and just be like, let me get my bunker challenge out of the way, or I'll just bring some paints with me and hang out there and you know, participate in the hobby around other human beings and enjoy my life. So I really like what the concept of the bunker does. I'm of course a big fan of getting back to places in person. You know, there's a big need for having that third space, and I think game stores really fill that role very well. You can show up there and have people you can talk to, you have commonality, participate, play games, or just talk about them, whatever, but get out there and, you know, be involved. There's the general 40K stuff, there's the general painting stuff, they have a combat patrol league, they're pushing more into Warcry and Warhammer Underworlds. Like, they're really expanding that. And the magazine also shows that people at, you know, Warhammer magazine, White Dwarf magazine, are actually participating in that too. So you can follow along with how their combat patrol league went, and you can compare notes or, you know, share what your games are doing. And White Dwarf asks for a lot of feedback, at least, you know, in all of the articles, there's always a place that you can write into them and share how you're doing. So if you are participating in the bunker side, if you are doing that as just your own personal group, an online group, or at your game store, then, you know, make sure to let White Dwarf know how you guys are doing with that, because I'm sure they'd want to know. Another super neat thing about this particular issue is that there is a punch out of the stratagems for 10th edition, which I find very handy because there's not very many to memorize, but it's so nice to have just a physical card. So I was also unreasonably excited about that. So yeah, as I mentioned, they are doing more of the Warcry stuff. The magazine mentions that on a quarterly basis, they're gonna kind of rotate through a lot of the skirmish games. So that's gonna be Necromunda and Warcry and Warhammer Underworld. So depending on which one you gravitate more toward, you can check out to see if a particular White Dwarf has what you're looking for that in that given month. But there's new scenarios and fun stuff to play there. Okay, there was another really cool thing that they've added, and honestly, I always wanted to see that in like the No Quarter magazines. There is a article in here, and I guess it's part of the bunker, called Basic Training. And it is this really cool idea of, hey, here's a specific scenario. Here's a Space Marine captain. Who would you put him with? You know, what would give him the best advantage? Just ways of thinking about the game that you can just read about and pick up, so that you know, it's not necessarily teaching you all of the in-depth strategies of the game, but you sort of start to get some basics which help you to think about how to look at some of the characters that you would add in building your list. And so they'll actually provide different scenarios and how to look at a given combat situation and, you know, approach it. So there's also like a little, they go over multiple examples, and then there's even like a little test at the end that asks how you would handle a situation, and the answers at the back of the magazine for what they would recommend. But I think that opens up fun conversation. And if you feel really intimidated by something like playing Warhammer, or if you feel like you're just, like you don't have great resources, or you can't get good information on how to play your specific army, this I think helps give you topics to start from, because even if it doesn't apply to your specific army, it's still a very similar concept, and you could say, oh, okay, they were thinking about it based on, you put this Space Marine captain with these guys because his benefit applies to this unit, and that makes a really big difference when I have this kind of unit, or, some other bonus that they would get from it. And so you think about how to synergize with your models. So I am such a huge fan of the basic training articles in here. So I think you do, I guess, Stephen Box, who looks way too tan to be British, but there you go. And I'm going to interrupt real quick just to say that if you are enjoying this video and enjoying this content, please make sure to let me know by liking the video and leave a comment. I'd like to know what your favorite article in this issue of White Dwarf is. We haven't gone through it all yet, but let me know if you've already read it. If you haven't, then keep watching and then make that comment. And then, of course, if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe, ring the bell, do all the things so that when I put out content, you know about it. Thank you. All right, back to the review. In addition, on the bunker side of it, it's a fairly large article. They have a painting guide for painting your Tyranids from the Leviathan box set, because we know that's kind of been the recent hotness lately. Lots of options for how you want to paint it. They go over a very basic scheme in here, but obviously you can do what you want with them because they're bugs, and we all know that bugs come in many different colors. So another really interesting article that is in 490 of White Dwarf is the discussion with the actual developers for 40K 10th edition. And there's an interview with the developers that talk about the design philosophy that went into some of the changes. For example, getting rid of the psychic phase and incorporating it into the rest of the game. How that affected, what made them come to that conclusion. How they approached battle tests, battle shock tests, which actually really changed my opinion a little bit on it, because I didn't know how I felt about battle shock, but after reading it, considering the idea is that before, in older editions, if you had models that failed a morale test, you just lost more models because they just ran away from the board. And that was just the conclusion every single model came to if they failed a morale test. But with battle shock, it's a lot more like a pinning situation. From an RP level, you can sort of think of it as, there's a bunch of different reasons why they might not specifically engage in your order, or why they would lose objective control. But you don't just randomly lose guys. Not everybody just runs away. So the battle shock idea really kind of has a lot more granularity, and I really liked that. Like I said, they also talked about incorporating aspects of the psychic phase into just the rest of the game, so there's a little bit more responsiveness if you have models with psychic abilities. I wouldn't know what that's like, but if you have it, it's probably fun. They also talked about re-adding characters to units again, which wasn't a thing in the last edition, so having that back kind of made things feel fun. The reason for using specific keywords to help simplify things. Overall, I appreciate the transparency of this article in just discussing how they approach the game to make it feel very accessible. Obviously, one of the biggest differences is just the army composition and how they approach that. They talk about it. They talk about all of the major changes to the game, which is a very worthwhile read and definitely worth checking out. The next article in here talks about the Tyrannic Wars, so against the Tyranids. It's told through a bunch of pamphlets back and forth via propagandists arguing with each other about the status of the Imperium against the Tyranids and how those battles have been going. There's a review, of course, of the Leviathan models, which, if you've gotten the new Leviathan box set, I'm sure you are already quite familiar with the models, but they talk about some of the redesigns of the different sculpts. I think the major one is, of course, the Screamer Killer. Lovely. So designer notes talking about those re-sculpts and the new models that they expanded on with the Leviathan box set. And of course, it is followed up with a battle report. So there is a first contact battle report of the Leviathan box set getting played over at GW Studios, and you can read about how that lovely battle went. So swinging over to the Age of Sigmar aspect of the magazine, there is a special challenge out there, Path of the Warlords, they call it. So if you are an Age of Sigmar player, there are specific challenges that are given every few months. It almost seems quarterly, but it's not quite, of different challenges you can try for with your games and build up different points and see how you do. It's just for fun, but you know, if you've got a group of people, it helps kind of, again, keep you involved, keep you engaged, keep you painting, keep you playing. There is a fun, though short little article, Arcana, where you listen to an imprisoned man discuss the origins of gods, I guess within the Age of Sigmar world. And it starts off pretty reasonable, then it gets a little crazy. So it's a fun little article, just again talking about how gods are manifest, and he gets pretty opinionated by the end, and feels like you know, magic is theft or whatever. There's a little faction focus on the Sylvaneth, the druidic plant people. What are they, like wood elf equivalents, I guess? Really, really beautiful models. Just a painting guide and how you can develop your specific faction, how you might name them and what their backstory would be. So that's their faction focus for Age of Sigmar this month. And all the plant people are painted so beautifully. Oh my gosh, there's this beautiful picture in here too of the phoenix bark models, just how they named that particular Sylvaneth model. And they have this flame theme going on. It's just incredible. Okay, so another fun one is a focus on Warhammer Underworlds. Glory Points is what it's called, but they are coming out with new decks. They're called rival decks, and they're just pre-built, non-changeable decks that have different themes to them, and you can just buy that deck and then play your Underworlds game without needing to do any of the deck building aspect of it. So I will be picking some of these up because I really enjoyed playing Warhammer Underworlds, but I'm not really like a deck building kind of person. And they go over like 4 different ones in this article that are just these, again, pre-built decks, and you can use any warband you want with them, but they might perform a little different depending on what theme of deck you get. But that is a lot easier a decision-making process than specifically deck building to see, you know, you kind of want to min-max, or you feel like an idiot if you don't make it exactly right. So these are just like off the shelf, ready to go, fun ways of playing. So they also have like a review of what each of them kind of lean toward as far as a play style. And they also kind of match up what, you know, some suggestions for what faction or what warband would work well with those specific rival decks. So if you are a fan of Warhammer Underworlds because it's super easy to get into but don't really love the deck building side of it, consider some rival decks. Okay, so after a little bit of a Necromunda talk, they go into a fun Blood Bowl League. So they actually have a Blood Bowl League recorded in here with the first couple of rounds down. It doesn't fully finish out, so you're totally invested to see like who wins in the Blood Bowl. They give just very brief like battle report summaries of how all of the games went, and yeah, I think in the next issue they'll actually have whoever finally won out. They had like 25 people all participating in this Blood Bowl League, so it sounds super amazing. I don't know if you out there still play Blood Bowl, who all out there actually still plays Blood Bowl. It always seems like a fun game. Have you ever done a league? It always seemed like a fun idea to me because of course it's football, like it's like football season, right? So it seems like it would lean into a league really, really well. And so they actually are doing that with this magazine for this issue, and they will have the conclusion of who the Blood Bowl champion is in 491. And then it ends on one of my favorite parts of it. It's the final part, the conclusion of the Black Library Grombrindle series. It ends on when the final note is Bitter Oaths, and it's the exciting conclusion of what happens with the 5 oath breakers that journey into the mountain to break a curse. And it is a delightful story. I enjoyed every moment of it. I can't wait to read the next next article of the Black Library, little bits. These have been basically my favorite parts of the magazine every month. And I can't recommend it enough. It always feels like you're following some RPG story. You're just this actual adventuring party going on some kind of really interesting, epic, and serious journey. And they've all been well fleshed out individual characters. It's very well done. So again, I can't speak highly enough of the Grombrindle series. Okay, and that is pretty much it for the magazine. Like I said, at the very end, you have the answer follow-up to the basic training question provided in the bunker portion of, or the bunker article of the magazine. But yeah, it was a really dense issue full of a bunch of new information. And again, they really are leaning into a lot of the community stuff, which I super appreciate. I think it's super important for our hobby, again, to be around each other and be social and engage with one another. So I don't know if you guys feel the same way. What do you think of the bunker side of it? Is that something that your local gaming store is doing? Is that something that even seems appealing to you? Are you guys doing any sort of like Discord groups or something to kind of keep tabs with each other? I know for the local game stores here, they have Discord groups, which have been really positive for keeping players engaged with each other, for setting up and scheduling games, for sharing hobby progress. And so I would hope to see maybe some of the bunker stuff kind of get incorporated into that. I think the basic training was a super valuable aspect of it. I love the printouts and getting my little cutout of the different stratagems, and also the very basic overview of how to play 10th edition, because you find yourself coming to the game store with a fair bit of paperwork these days, although I will take that to an end. So yeah, don't know if you've already read through this issue, but I'm happy to have finally completed it. Next one is issue 491, which, funny enough, already did arrive, so I'll be working on that next. So thank you all so much for watching. Let me know what your favorite part of this magazine review or the magazine in general is, and we will see you next time. Have a good one. How many? The entire chromatic scale. Yeah, all of them. You even have rainbow bugs. You've seen it like that oil slick coloring? That's pretty common. So,